Hello, how are you? Did you know that the brain of an anxious person can consume more nutrients than the brain of a non-anxious person? And that one of these nutrients, which is essential for memory, mood, and emotional regulation, can become reduced in key areas of our brain. Today, I'm going to tell you about this very interesting study, and you'll love to hear about it. I'll also tell you what this nutrient is and how you can add more of it to your diet. You're going to love it. Stay until the end. You won't want to miss it. Before we start, I want to ask you if you consider yourself an anxious person or not. Why do you think you are or aren't anxious? Write it for me down here in the comments and let me know when you notice that this started to interfere more in your life. I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video. That's super important to me. And if you know someone who could benefit, let's share this video and help more people. So let's talk about this nutrient that showed this correlation. The decrease of it was identified in the brains of anxious people, which is choline. So why does choline end up being so important, right? Choline is an essential nutrient, meaning that our body does produce small amounts of it, but not enough for all the vital functions we have. It takes part in fundamental processes such as the formation of cell membranes, the production of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter linked to memory and attention, mood regulation, muscle control, and communication between neurons. So, without adequate levels of choline, the brain ends up having difficulty carrying out tasks related to organization, decision-making, and even emotional stability. This study then analyzed another 25 previous studies involving people with and without anxiety issues to compare neurometabolites, which were measured using advanced brain imaging techniques. It was a very interesting study. So, they noticed that people with anxiety had significantly less choline in important regions, especially the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning, reasoning, decision-making, and emotional regulation. So, this reduction doesn't mean that you have a choline deficiency in your diet, nor is it a diagnosis of anything. What the authors propose is a hypothesis that a brain in a constant state of alertness may increase the demand for this nutrient, which is so important. So, they suggest, why would the brain of an anxious person consume more choline than that of a less anxious person? This is a very interesting part because anxiety is related, as we know, to the hyperactivation of the fight or flight system, which is controlled by the amygdala in our brain and modulated by the prefrontal regions. So, when the brain is always in this state of hypervigilance, communication between neurons increases, they have to talk to each other very quickly, there's more energy expenditure, neurotransmitters are produced in greater quantities, and acetylcholine, which depends directly on choline, as I mentioned, is used very intensively. So the more activity you have, the greater your metabolic demand. And so the hypothesis is that choline is being rapidly used up, which results in lower levels detected in tests. This doesn't mean a classic nutritional deficiency, but rather an increase in internal consumption. And it's something neuroscience is investigating, and it's really interesting. So now, what they weren't able to determine with this study, which is also important for us to understand, right? The authors of the study themselves make it clear that we still don't know if the reduction in choline causes anxiety, if the anxious brain consumes more choline, or if these two phenomena end up feeding into each other. You know, which came first, the chicken or the egg? There also isn't so far any suggestion from the researchers of a proven nutritional intervention that would correct this imbalance in isolation. The study points out some directions, but it still does not recommend self-supplementation unless you go to a doctor or nutritionist in your city who can give you specific guidance, because this can interfere with liver function, metabolism, and so on. What you should know is that choline is present in our diet, and you can increase your intake of choline-rich foods, especially since these are extremely healthy foods. For example, eggs are excellent sources of choline. I always mention this here when I talk about recipes with eggs, right? They have a good amount of choline. Chicken, fish, legumes, broccoli, cauliflower, and peanuts can also be good sources of choline and can be part of a healthy eating plan, which can help nourish your brain better. Just to be clear, this isn't going to treat anyone's anxiety, but as a complement, it can increase your choline intake, which is good for your health in a broader sense. So, why is it so interesting for us to know this in practice, right? If you can't supplement, why does this study end up being so important for people living with anxiety? Understanding this relationship between anxiety, brain activity, and even the metabolic demand that the brain itself has helps reduce the guilt many people feel when they think, why can't I just turn off my mind? Realizing that anxiety actually involves real biological processes. When we talk about issues related to the mind and emotions, people tend to think that someone who struggles with this is a weaker person. And that's not the case. It can truly be physiological, something that's influencing you, and there's no reason to feel ashamed. And it can encourage a more integrated view of emotional health and nutrition, right? Knowing about this physiological aspect involved and help ease some of the heavy burden that still exists for many people. The The central message of this study is very clear. Anxiety is not just an emotional issue. The brain of someone living with anxiety works differently, consumes energy differently, and requires specific strategies for each case. So, if you're struggling with a lot of anxiety, remember to seek help in your city. This can really improve your quality of life. A psychologist or a psychiatrist can guide you better regarding this issue, okay? Remember to like the video because that really helps me here on the channel, and share this interesting news with anyone you think might enjoy it. Let's expand this chain of good. That's what I want with the channel. See you next time. Bye.